There are calls for two women who potentially exposed thousands of Queenslanders to coronavirus to be jailed. Olivia Winnie Marenga and Diana Lasso travelled to Brisbane from COVID-plagued Melbourne and have since tested positive to the deadly disease. The pair is accused of lying to authorities about their travel, and a major testing and tracing operation is now underway.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And when it comes to acts of reckless stupidity, it's difficult to find a better example than the young Brisbane women who travelled to Melbourne only to return home with coronavirus. Their failure to be honest about where they'd been, putting the state at risk and leaving the Queensland Police Commissioner furious.
They went to extraordinary lengths to be deceitful and deceptive and, quite frankly, criminal in their behaviour.
So it's no surprise the women were named and shamed and whacked across the media.
Dumb and dumber.
From Melbourne to COVID mayhem.
But it was the Courier Mail's brutal front page that topped them all.
Enemies of the state.
All fair in the fight against a pandemic? Maybe so, given they may well have spread the disease. But was it fair to reveal where the sister and mother of one of the girls worked and to provoke hate and racism like this on social media?
Typical of this lot, deport them, not Australians.
Certain cultures have lower levels of conscientiousness.
Narcissistic bitches. Throw them in dungeon.
The pair were also copying it on TV, including criticism of their appearance.
It looks like they've had so much poison injected into their faces that it's gone to their brains.
While Chris Smith had already found them guilty over allegations they flew to Melbourne to steal handbags.
$4,000 fine. When I first heard this morning they copped a $4,000 fine, I thought to myself, oh, that's about 1/5 of those high-end handbags that they steal, according to Victoria Police.
Yes, on top of being charged with fraud for lying about their travel, they're also being investigated for theft as part of a criminal syndicate. So many will feel they deserve everything they got. But it's worth noting that other COVID sneaks have not been so shamed. Last week, Queensland Police said 40 people have made false declarations at the state border since it closed, including a Rockhampton doctor returning from Melbourne. Yet none has copped anything like the same media lashing, including these Victorians busted 3 weeks ago.
A group of 6 arrived at the border in a minivan but were turned around after they were caught lying on their declaration forms. They've been fined $24,000 in total.
And how did the Courier Mail cover that story? A tiny mention on page 7 with no one identified. And in March, The Age tracked down a wealthy couple who'd returned from Aspen and flouted mandatory self-isolation rules despite testing positive to COVID. But the paper's splash didn't name them, citing legal reasons. And that prompted the brother of one of the Queensland women to accuse the media of racism, telling The Current Affair,
"It's a mistake. I reckon if someone else did this, that wasn't of colour, y'all would be protecting them. Y'all be doing all of this."
While the mother of one of the women told the ABC that her daughter faced public vilification when other wrongdoers had been spared.
Nobody wants to give you support. She's very sad. She is my daughter. She's not an animal.
The Courier Mail's editor has defended his paper's front page coverage, telling The Guardian,
"This is a very real, serious public health issue, and people have the right to know if their life has been unwittingly jeopardised."
But others believe the brutal media shaming does more harm than good. As former LNP politician Ewan Jones told The Drum,
"There's just so much downside to putting their photos in the paper. There's just so much downside. What happens, what's the Courier Mail going to do if they're walking on the street and someone backhands them or someone spits on them or they find out where they live and their family is abused? And there's so much downside to this."
And Queensland's Human Rights Commissioner was also voicing concern.
Already we have seen comments to deport them, send them back to where they come from, and worse, alongside appallingly hyperbolic coverage from some media outlets, branding them with terms usually reserved for people accused of treason and other high-level crimes.
Sure, these women were stupid. Sure, they are culpable. But does the media need to lynch them and thereby encourage others to do so? Answer, no, it does not. And now to one of Australia's best and best-known investigative journalists, the Sydney Morning Herald's Kate McClymont, who has won countless awards, including the Gold Walkley, and brought us cracking stories like Dyson Hayden, Don Burke and Eddie Abid. And here she is, talking to the ABC's Barry Cassidy about how hard Australia's defamation laws have made her job.
Last year, I think I would have spent about 20% of my working life with lawyers about defamation suits. And I don't think people realise just how time-consuming and they're just terrible. And look, I understand that people do have the right to defend their reputations, but it's just, you know, we just have the toughest defamation laws in the entire world, I think.
So why is that a problem? Well, for starters, journalists here are about 10 times more likely to get sued than they are in Britain. And as lawyer Justin Quill says, it rarely ends well.
I'm never shocked when the media lose in court. The odds are nearly always stacked against the media.
And that is because the only practical defence available is to prove that everything they say is true, which, trust me, is much harder than it sounds. And for those who lose, payouts are huge, as we saw in the battle between Geoffrey Rush and the Daily Telegraph.
In total, he won a whopping $2.9 million, the biggest defamation payout in Australian history.
The way it's calculated is just wrong. The average punter would get less if they're injured at work or even sexually abused.
Rebel Wilson initially won even more, $4.5 million plus costs from Bauer Media, later reduced to $600,000 on appeal. And the four Wagner brothers won $3.7 million in damages from Alan Jones, 2GB and 4BC, plus another $3.6 million from Channel 9 and Nick Cater, and settled with The Spectator for a further $570,000. So, with the stakes so high, it's no wonder that investigative reporters like Kate McClymont are a dying breed.
Every single story I do, I now say to myself, OK, if I am sued over this, who is going to come to court? Who is going to stand up in court? Will they be a good witness? And I think, you know, fancy getting to the stage now where every story is a possible defamation black hole. And given that the media is in dire financial straits, there is limited appetite for taking on litigious people, big companies.
But help is at hand, because reforms to be introduced by all states this year will make life easier for responsible journalists and harder for powerful shonks. These changes will reinforce the cap on damages at $421,000 for non-economic loss, remove the right to sue if you can't show serious harm, and give the media a powerful new defence it desperately needs, as New South Wales Attorney General Mark Speakman explains.
In the case of journalism, we do have a defence of qualified privilege in the defamation legislation at the moment, but a mass media organisation has never successfully relied upon that defence in Australia. So there will now be a new defence of public interest if the defendant can establish that the publication was in the public interest and reasonably believed to be in the public interest.
And as defamation lawyer Michael Bradley told readers of Crikey, that will be all a defendant will need to do.
If those elements can be proved, then the defence is complete. It won't matter whether what was published was true or not.
So, will that defence give open slather to gutter journalism and hit jobs? Absolutely not. According to Matt Collins, who acted for Rebel Wilson against Women's Day,
the new defence will not protect crappy journalism. I don't believe it would have made any difference in, for example, the Rebel Wilson, Geoffrey Rush or Wagner family cases. The defence will be more likely to operate in cases of serious investigative journalism that relies on whistleblowers and confidential sources, or the drawing of inferences after painstakingly piecing together information from disparate sources.
Two recent high-profile cases fit that bill. Joe Hockey's win against Fairfax for Treasurer for Sale, and Chinese businessman Chow Chak-wing's win against the Herald for suggesting he had bribed a UN official. Another who could also benefit from the public interest defence would be ABC journalist Steve Kinane. In a case that's winding up this week, after 7 weeks in court, Kinane is being sued for his book Fair Game by two doctors from Sydney's Chelmsford Hospital, who were named and shamed in the 1990 Royal Commission into allegations of medical malpractice at the hospital that led to 24 deaths. The decision to allow that case to proceed effectively meant
the author and publisher could not rely on the conclusions of the Royal Commission. To defend themselves, they would need to prove anew that all the imputations were in fact true.
That is surely a ridiculous exercise. But until these changes take effect, it is the reality of our defamation laws. So, will the reforms happen, and will they have the desired effect? Matt Collins told Media Watch,
the reforms, if passed, will send a clear message from Parliament to the courts that they are expected to provide better protection to freedom of expression.
Meanwhile, another media law expert, Professor David Rolfe, told Media Watch,
the public interest defence is a transplant. It may take in a new environment, or it may not take in the way that its drafters intend.
And writing in Crikey, Michael Bradley told readers,
fingers crossed this one gets through. It would be an absolute game changer for freedom of the press in Australia. Then we just have to hope the courts don't stuff it up.
the public interest defence has been operating successfully in Britain for many years, so Australian courts really should be able to make it work if they want to. But should we be going further? Matt Collins says yes. Given a blank slate, he says,
I would throw the cause of action for defamation out entirely and start from scratch. Has the publication actually damaged the plaintiff's reputation in some way, and if so, how? And is the public interest in freedom of expression in relation to the defendant's publication such that the plaintiff should be denied a remedy? Not that hard.
I love that confidence. And in the meantime, Collins says he expects the changes will make a difference. Let us hope he is right. But now, to a new front in the culture wars, when the Sydney pub giving Captain Cook the hook.
Cook cancelled.
Sydney pub caves in to woke brigade.
That Daily Teletease led to the exclusive scoop inside, and readers were left in no doubt what the paper thought of it.
Take a Captain Cook at this lunacy.
It has been the Captain Cook Hotel for more than 100 years, but now the new owners of a landmark Paddington pub have cancelled Australia's most famous explorer.
Yes, as the telly explained, the rebrand to the Captain, quote, wiped out all mentions of Captain James Cook, including on their website, social media and menus, making it an irresistible story for telecartoonist Warren Brown.
We don't serve your kind in here.
So, who is the woke lefty publican who scrubbed the good captain from the walls? And why did he do it? As the telly eventually told us,
owner, Robbie Moroney, said he wanted to give the place a fresh face and insisted the change was not a nod to the cancel culture movement.
Not a nod to cancel culture? If we take Robbie at his word, you might think that would have killed the story, or at the very least stopped it there. But over at 2GB, they were just getting started.
He denies it has anything to do with trying to erase Captain Cook, but that is what has happened. Captain Cook is out and the captain is in.
And when Ben Fordham brought anti-cancel culture warrior Rowan Dean on his show, the outrage bubbled over.
This infuriates me because they may as well just go the whole hog and rename it the Karl Marx Hotel. I won't be setting foot in that pub ever again because that's my choice, because I can smell wokeness, I can smell political correctness gone mad. Worst of all, I can smell cancel culture at its roots.
And Rowan's trusty nose can sniff these things out, however hard they are denied. As they were again that morning by the hotel keeper, calling into 2GB to say,
we're not distancing ourselves at all from Captain Cook. We're just simply rebranded on our social media.
Nothing to do with cancel culture in any way?
Nothing to do with it at all.
So, finally, that was that. But not at the telly, which was back on the case next day.
The push to banish Cook, just so crook.
Pub's move slammed.
And not for Dean, who attacked the pub again in the paper, along with One Nation politician Mark Latham and two Conservative think tanks, with a James Morrow column for good measure.
The captain gets sunk.
So why did the hotel give Cook the hook? We also spoke to Robbie Moroney, who swears the debate on James Cook's legacy was never a factor. We also discovered the rebrand is not new and not a reaction to recent race protests. The new name and logo were launched in February. And the moniker, Captain Cook Hotel, remains on the licence, on the pub's walls and on customer receipts and payment machines, as does the bust of the captain that sits on top of the pub, which is safely cemented in place with a complete restoration planned. All of which, Robbie says, he told the Telegraph when they rang for comment. We've also seen some of the feedback delivered to the pub on social media and via email, and it's not pretty.
What a snivelling, pathetic, poor excuse for Australia. You weak, pissy-assed, socialist, grovelling vermin.
Robbie's now dealing with the press and angry punters while trying to make a buck in tough pandemic times. He told us bluntly,
it's been a fucking nightmare.
And all thanks to a newspaper that for many years has proudly proclaimed, we're for Sydney. That's all from us tonight. There's more on our website, including statements from Dr. Matt Collins QC and Professor David Rolfe. And don't forget, Media Bites, every Thursday on your favourite social media platform. But for now, until next week, Goodbye.